Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Thursday, May 13th, and I want to welcome you to this week's installment of C-Suite Snacks. My name is Steve Ronan, the leader of Citrin Cooperman's consulting and outsourcing practices and the host of today's webinar. Since last March, it's hard to think of a sector that was as deeply and broadly impacted by COVID as hospitality. And restaurants in particular are now facing substantial, potentially secular changes as they pursue recovery and reinvention. Today, we're joined by Stacy Gilbert and Denise Koch from our restaurant practice, who will talk about some of the major considerations for restaurants as they evolve, grapple with evolving legislation and government support, and ultimately put themselves back on the path to thrive again. A few administrative reminders before we start. We accept questions throughout the webinar, so please find the Q&A button on your Zoom screen and feel free to enter your questions as we go. We will save a few minutes at the end to address any questions we receive. We'll also be doing our weekly snack basket giveaway, where a lucky attendee from today's session will win a craft basket of snacks. The winner will be announced at the end of today's session. And finally, if you're here because you found it on our website or on social media, I encourage you to sign up for our mailing list and make sure you receive an invite for our new snack-sized topics each week. Please also visit our C-Suite Snacks Content Hub on our website to view the recordings and look through the decks of prior presentations. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Denise to begin today's session. Denise, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm here with Stacy and Steve, and hopefully you guys will enjoy our little true snacks here for you. First up, can you switch the slide? Keep going. One more. Perfect. So first up, we want to talk about landlords and leases. And although it's been a year since the pandemic, most people have already started reaching out to their landlords a year ago. And at that time, most of our clients had their rent deferred. And now that we're a year later and the restaurants are still not up and running and back to full capacity, we have noticed that some landlords have started forgiving some of that deferred rent. In the New York City area, especially, a lot of my clients have had great success with that. In terms of renegotiating the lease, there are a few things that you could do. You could change the terms of the lease, perhaps get a shorter lease or a longer lease with a percentage of sales. And with the percentage of sales, I have a client in the city who was closed for about a year, and his landlord was fantastic. And what the landlord did was, once the business opened, he started charging them a percentage of sales, meaning if the sales were down, then the rent was down. And it actually helped the client for many months. And that type of lease is going to continue until the end of 2022, and then they're going to renegotiate again. Also in New York, there are plenty of space options available. I have a few clients who had to turn the keys over because the landlord was not willing to work with them and decrease the rent. So they handed the keys over, and they're planning to move their space to a different area because the options for renting are much better for businesses that are out there now. Stacy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Denise. That was a great start to everything. So many of you do know that Denise and I are heavily concentrated in the restaurant industry, but we do want to make sure that we touch on a lot of issues that relate to just about any industry. And, leases certainly is near and dear to everyone's heart, whether you're in the restaurant industry or you're not. The one thing that I will say is I have been hearing a great amount of deals that are coming across people's desks. Some are even, turnkey space because unfortunately there is quite a bit of empty space. Early in the pandemic, landlords, were buying time and just deferring the rent, as Denise said. And, after several months of renegotiating, many of them have just renegotiated the lease altogether instead of deferring, as Denise said. So you really do need to have these conversations with your landlords if you haven't already, and hopefully you will in fact get a good deal. There are some people who are actually taking space, not even knowing what they want to do with the space yet, just because the deals are in fact that good. Something that you may want to consider. some of those opportunities that are out there. There are also many people that are looking to downsize their space. And we will be hosting a live interview with the founder of Kettle Space, who will talk about an innovative way to rent space on the fly, with a quick reservation system. It's pretty cool. This is not necessarily for a brick and mortar type business, but it is definitely a solution for meeting space and many other circumstances like a hybrid work environment, which obviously a lot of offices will be going to. And that's going to be held on Wednesday, May 26th. And I think you'll all find that very interesting. So that's all we have to say on the landlords and leases. We can go to the next slide now. So rethinking operations, everyone really had to do this. They had to pivot. Everything is different now. It's going to take a long time for people to forget what they've gone through. And we need to make them comfortable. Of course, safety, is the primary concern. Expectations have changed. And in order to be successful, we need to deliver according to these expectations. So you have to put yourself in your customer's shoes. I know Denise had told me a story that she was eating in a restaurant and the tables were very close to one another. And she felt uncomfortable and ended up leaving the restaurant due to her discomfort. So we really need to, look around and see what our customers see. We need to make them feel comfortable. Play around with your website just to see if it's user friendly, because we all know people are going online more. The world is just not going to be the same. And truthfully, it shouldn't be. With businesses having to think about things that they never thought of before, they've had to broaden their business model and set themselves up for potential future success, just out of sheer desperation. In the restaurant industry, those that started delivery service will continue, but, perhaps in a reduced fashion. Those that created an app for easier service will need to continue. Those that partnered with third parties to market and sell their products will continue. But those that didn't invest in technology or innovative ways to reach the public because they were shuttered will now have to compete and keep up with those that did. So if you need to engage a professional to assist you in automating your business with the latest technology, I personally think it will be money well spent. Think about tomorrow and the years to come, not about the past year. Next slide, please.
That's me, I'm up. I'm sure that everybody here is tired of hearing about the PPP and all of the other issues, the PPP, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the shuttered venue, and the ERC. But we just wanted to speak to you briefly about that, just to let you know a few things. As you know, the applications were extended through March 31st, 2021, but some of the larger vendors have exhausted all of their funds. So if your application has not already, if you have not already applied for the PPP with your vendor, with your lender, it's possible that you might get shut out. There are some smaller community financial institutions that are still accepting applications, but you have to really get your application in there. I had a client who was denied at Chase, and I'm not really sure why, but we've been going on for a few months now, and Chase told us yesterday that we should reach out to a much smaller institution. Perhaps we could get funding there. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but the client is going to try to do that. In addition, as you all are aware, the forgiveness is due 10 months after the covered period. And so I do have a few clients who applied for forgiveness in 2020 because their covered period ended and they wanted to be forgiven in 2020. But the majority of my clients have not started the forgiveness process, but will be starting it in the next few weeks. As for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which we all were, out there and totally into getting focused on it, that application opened on May 3rd. And as everybody is aware, there were priority groups there for the first 21 days. In addition, you cannot apply for RRF. You cannot apply for RRF if you've already applied for the SVOG. But I do want to make one thing, make one comment. A friend of mine, she applied for the RRF on May 3rd. Obviously, she's a woman-owned business. She has a very, very small business, and she was approved. And also, she was already funded. She got funded yesterday. So she's super excited and super happy. And that's a great thing. At least we know that they're moving along. The SVOG is for live venues. And if you've applied for SVOG, again, you cannot apply for RRF, but you can, continue with your application. One thing that most businesses were not really focused on was the employee retention tax credit. That has been extended until December 31st of 2021. And the potential credit for businesses per employee per quarter in 2021 is $7,000. In 2020, the potential credit is $5,000. But again, you cannot use the same wages for the employee retention credit that you use for a PPP forgiveness. For sure, I would reach out to your advisor, ask them about the ERC. I have plenty of clients that amended their fourth quarter 2020 payroll tax returns and have received a significant amount of money. I urge you to call somebody and ask them about this, for sure. Stacy, anything else?
Yeah, I actually just heard this morning that so far applicants are seeking $65 billion from the RRF, which is far more in excess of the $28.6 billion that Congress allocated to the program. So the vast majority of its funding is only going to get to the priority groups. Obviously, we hope and think that Congress will appropriate more funding. However, there's certainly no certainty on this. And even if they fund more, we're not really sure what kind of limitations or restrictions there will be on any new funding. So this is the latest and not so much the greatest that just came out this morning. I think everyone had done the math anyway and realized from the very beginning this was never going to be enough. Everyone needs to kind of sit back and wait to see what Congress and our politicians are going to do about it. They knew it as well from the beginning. This will be something that we're all going to have to push for. I also know that there was a lot of confusion with the RRF applications. Hopefully everyone got their answers. I will say this was one program that the SBA was really on top of with respect to answering a lot of people's questions. They gave webinars constantly. So we truly do appreciate that. So let's see what happens now with the rest of the funding. For everyone out there, if you do have a PPP forgiveness application that you need help with, please feel free to reach out to Citrin Cooperman.
Happy to help. I think we need the next slide. One more. One more. Thank you. Sorry about that. Stacy, I guess I'll start again. Here, we wanted to talk to you about your cash flow and your revenue streams. Obviously, with the pandemic, nobody saw this coming, and nobody thought that this pandemic would happen for over a year now, right? Most restaurants, obviously, we know restaurants were hit the hardest, especially in the New York area. So my suggestion to you is to monitor your cash flow daily. Sometimes that can't be done because you're busy or you have other things going on, but at the least, you should be monitoring your cash flow weekly. You should set up budgets and compare those budgets to your actual expenses. There's plenty of time in your business that you think an expense is X amount of dollars and you budget for that and it comes in much higher. when you have higher expected expenses, then it hits your bottom line, which then affects your day-to-day living. Keeping an eye on your larger expenses could help with your future cash flow. If you could decrease some of those larger expenses, it would enable you to have cash for future months in case something like this was to happen again. Perhaps you would consider licensing your brand. I have a client who has plenty of licensing agreements in the Middle East and in Asia. And so throughout this, even though those were hit as well, the businesses were open and they did receive some royalty income. It was able to keep them afloat a little bit, not too long, but there was some cash flow coming in from that part of the business. Stacy?
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, many businesses never did projections. They just didn't project their financial results. And not only should they be projecting their financial results, but they should be comparing them to the actual results as they go along, and perhaps even adjusting those projections on an ongoing basis, because we're kind of, in territory that we've never been in before. As an example, at the beginning of the year, if you projected your annual revenue to grow by, say, 25%, and you're halfway through the year, and you've only seen an increase of 10%, go back to the drawing board and revise your projections to see where you might land in the coming months by the end of the year. And as Denise said, monitoring your results is absolutely essential these days. Also, be creative. Be creative, and that's really what saved businesses from closing their doors permanently. There were marketplace sellers that people were starting to use with prepared food and many other types of merchandise. I think people never thought that they would ever, be selling anything through Amazon or Goldbelly or some of these other marketplace sellers. They had to think outside of the box. Instacart was another one. I would bet that your competitors are already partnering with these types of businesses, which means that they have an advantage. The exposure alone could make it worth considering. So definitely something that people should be looking into. The most important message that we could send to you right now is what used to be enough is no longer enough. You need to monitor and think outside of the box. It's not what it was any longer. Next slide, please. How to thrive in any outcome. Well, let's hope that that's exactly what everyone accomplishes. The term that I've been using the most is to expect the unexpected. If you have a profit in your business, do not distribute all of the cash with the expectation that you will just earn it back in the next year. Always maintain enough working capital to support your business during a rough patch, which clearly would have helped a lot of people if they had enough cash flow to support them throughout the challenging months that they faced. Understand that many people depend on the decisions that you make. Your employees. There are businesses that even paid their employees, even when they didn't work. Expect that the culture is going to have to change. Your employees are gun shy and they need some stability in their workplace. Think about fringe benefits and other perks that you can provide. If one person is controlling the business, make sure you have someone else that can jump in and help. We've seen circumstances where business owners got very sick from COVID, and others had to figure out how to even get a check signed because the owner was the only one who could sign checks. So you need to plan for, again, the unexpected. Understand your insurance policies and your leases. Some people had personal guarantees on their leases. Some businesses sustained damages due to looting. I'm also hearing more and more about hacking into their computer systems, cyber attacks. We recently had a client that used a cloud-based accounting system, and the third party was actually attacked, and our client lost all of their accounting information, and it all has to be recreated. So, we definitely need to rethink about how we're protecting our business in that sense. Understand your vulnerabilities, and always, always think of Citrin Cooperman and reach out for any assistance on that matter. Denise?
I would say, as Stacy said before, think outside the box. I've had many clients who changed their way of thinking in their restaurant. What used to be a sit down is a huge takeout to go now. And that helped them survive this pandemic. And also learn from this experience. Think about tomorrow. Don't just think about today. I know it's very difficult in businesses, and when things aren't going well, it's hard to save, but you got to try to save for a rainy day. It's possible this might happen again, but I do think that in the past year, we really have learned how to survive through this. Some restaurants, not so much, but now they're starting to open back up again. And I do think that people want to get out there and go out to dinner and give back to the restaurants. So we're here if you need anything, if you want to give us a call, if you want to reach out to us, we're happy to talk you through any of this, give you our advice, and update you on anything new that's coming along.
Hey, Steve, ready for you.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Denise. So, a few trends that you touched on, I think that are going to likely have a notable impact going forward. Especially Stacy, I think you mentioned Goldbelly and Instacart and delivery services and some of these things. Not much of an option anymore. Restaurants need to be participating in them, but are there things that they need to understand about the nature of doing business on those platforms that is a lot different than running a sit-down restaurant, and they should be aware of before they jump in?
Yeah, certainly there are differences. And sales tax is always one of the things that we warn our clients about when they are dealing with marketplace sellers, because there's a definite downside to who's doing the sale and who should be collecting the sales tax, and a lot of people kind of fall into that pitfall, and we kind of walk them through that. In terms of how the economics work, by no means is it as financially rewarding to use a marketplace, but something is better than nothing. And people found that it saved them when they couldn't sustain their own operations without it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Stacy. And one of the things that I've noticed up near me is it seems like the restaurants that have opened up outdoors are crowded again. People have been really wanting to go out, and I think try to regain some sense of normal. Are there the customer expectations have obviously changed around some of these dine-in options, and are there things that you're seeing restaurants do that are more successful than others at making people feel comfortable, to your earlier point, and getting those crowds back in, that restaurants that aren't doing it yet should consider?
I could take that. Only
Sure.
I feel like I've done not a ton, but I have tried to do some outdoor dining or dining in, just because, you want to give back, right? So I would say that the thought process behind outdoor dining has changed. I think that's going to be around now forever. Like, I know people enjoy to dine out, but since this pandemic, people don't care that it's 95 degrees out. They want to be outside because they've just been in the house for an entire year. So I think this summer, outdoor dining is going to skyrocket again. And I think people are going to go back. As for indoor dining, I think you have to keep distance, and you have to make sure that your customer feels comfortable being there. And when it's too crowded, I think it gives people, it sort of freaks people out. Now, there's some younger people who obviously don't care when they're out, right? There are people who go into restaurants and they don't even want to wear a mask. But I think if you have some distance and, you know, you clean the tables, you have to show the customer that you're actually keeping it clean and that they're wiping the tables down and they're not just seating people. You know, same thing with the menus. I mean, some menus get wiped down. I think it's awesome now on the phone, you just scan and now the menu's on your phone. You don't have to touch anything. I mean, that's a savings in itself for like your menus. You don't have to print out menus anymore, right? I mean, there's a lot. I think if you you have to keep a clean space, and I think people are excited to get back to eating. I know I am.
And do you have to think about those things differently, Denise, if you're in a different sector of the industry, if you're fine dining versus, you know, fast casual versus takeout? Are there different modes that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have to do what they feel comfortable with, right? So I think in fine dining, I think if you have a bigger space, it's easier for people to be spread out, right? If you're a quick to go, people tend to be on top of each other because you're sort of running in and running out. I do think people themselves, the customer, has to take a look too, right? If you don't feel comfortable, you have to say something. And I think some business owners, maybe they don't realize because they're not there all the time, right? What you and I might think is crowded, they might say, hey, this is like a quarter of what crowded looks like.
Sure, yeah.
So I think those dividers are a great thing. I think they make people feel more comfortable. Any of that plastic that can be wiped down, I think makes people feel comfortable. I think separating that middle seat, you know, separate that. I think that makes people feel comfortable as well. I think we're ready to get back to normal.
Well, that's great. Denise, Stacy, thanks very much for joining us today, sharing your wisdom. I think we all share a similar sentiment that we hope restaurants can get back and thrive as quickly as possible. We'll all be better off for it. So appreciate you guys doing your part and sharing your advice today.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Steve. Thanks, everybody.
Folks, continuing our weekly discussion next week, we're going to be talking to Ramsey Goodrich about the current M&A environment in the middle market, including how to balance changing tax legislation, frothy valuation trends, and the roadmap to your own transition. And in that same spirit of business transition, on May 27th, we'll be joined by Citrin Cooperman's ESOP experts, where we'll discuss if and how an employee stock ownership plan is the right transaction alternative for you and your business. This week's snack basket is going to go to Alan D. Alan, congratulations. We see you've attended several of these. We thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoy your craft basket of snacks. And once again, folks, thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you have a great rest of your week, a terrific weekend, and hope to see many of you back here next week or on a future session. Thanks.